So just confessing from the outset, this is going to be kind of weird for me because I'm not used to like having people back here. So you all get to see the magic sauce of my notes here. I don't know how I feel about that, but today is the first Sunday in a season in the church called Advent. It's from the Latin adventus, which means coming or arrival. I was explaining this to my 4-year-old Sam this morning, and he seemed to get it, so I think you guys can too. We're looking forward to Christmas, right? That's our yearly celebration of Jesus' first advent or arrival in our world. But even more, we're looking forward to Jesus' promised second advent or arrival at the end of all days. So yes, this is a ritual season. We're looking forward to the observance of Christmas. But here's the thing, rituals exist to prepare us for reality. And Advent, in this ritual season, we're remembering a reality. And that is that we, all of us, will stand in the presence of Christ. And there will come a moment when the gig is up. So this morning, I want to look at Matthew chapter 24. This is Jesus' pronouncements over the fall of Jerusalem and the end of the world. I know, a nice lighthearted morning, right? At least the sun is, well, never mind. This is one of those passages that, along with the book of Revelation, has often been misused to support a lot of wild theories over the years. So part of my aim this morning is to draw us back to what Jesus is really saying, and to kind of sit under the weight of that. So if you have a Bible in the pew near you, I invite you to open it to Matthew chapter 24. This is going to be one of those sermons where it's going to help you immensely to have the text in front of you because there's a lot going on here. Our focus text is verses 29 through 44, that little chunk kind of in the middle. But I want to start by reading the very beginning of the chapter, verse 1. Matthew 24, verse 1. A little context. Jesus is in Jerusalem. He's already made his grand entrance into town. Palm Sunday has already happened here. He's been going into the temple. He has this huge following, and he's ticked off every religious leader around. And here at the beginning of chapter 24, we see him leaving the temple for the very last time. And the disciples are, as they're walking out, this is a symbolic rejection, by the way. He's leaving the temple for the very last time. And the disciples look up and they're like, oh, look at those buildings. They're kind of oohing and awing. The temple in Jesus' day was grand. It was built by Herod the Great. It had some of the most magnificent architecture in the ancient world. So they're oohing and awing at the architecture, and Jesus just throws a wet blanket on the whole thing. You see these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. This is the kind of thing that TSA officers tackle you for. And has anyone ever been to the White House before? Raise a show of hands. Right? Have you ever, you can stand on the gates outside of the White House. There's like a black picket fence, and like you think to yourself, oh, I could hop that easily. And then you look over in the bushes, and there's like 12 different security dudes holding these massive rifles. And you suddenly become a little bit more like reined in on the jokes that you tell, you know what I mean? Authorities in our day get restless when people hear this kind of talk. And they did actually in Jesus' day too. Some scholars think that this is the kind of talk that got him crucified. The temple was the most important place in the world for Jews in Jesus' day. They believed that the temple was indestructible. Heaven and earth could pass away, but the temple will never pass away. It was the portal between heaven and earth. This is like where it all happens, folks. And for a lot of Jews, they thought that this was their magic token. The temple was sort of their security blanket. As long as the temple stands, we have God on our side, so therefore we will be okay. But Jesus said that the temple pointed to him. Security is in God, not in some building. So after 3 years of pleading and preaching to God's people, he leaves the temple one last time, and he says, basically, this whole system is doomed. It's all going down. Now, if you were following Jesus in this moment, physically following him around, would you be a little confused? I would. So they come to him later. This is verse 3. The disciples came to him privately, and they have a couple of questions. 2, to be exact. Number 1, this is Matthew 24:3. You can see it in the text. Question 1, when will these things be? In other words, you said the temple is going to be destroyed. When's that going to happen? That's these things they're talking about. And then question 2, what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age? In other words, we know you're the Messiah, Jesus. We confessed it, and you said, yep, I sure am. So when are you going to, rule? These are the 2 questions. And the rest of Matthew 24, Jesus is going to be spending unpacking his answers to these 2 questions. Number 1, when will these things be? In other words, when will the temple be destroyed? Number 2, what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age? So I want to say something about each of these. First, the destruction of the temple. When will these things be? In the passage leading right up to ours, I know, we're not even to the passage yet. Look out, guys. Jesus tells the disciples that there will be this time of distress and deception by false teachers and some kind of abomination thing going on in the temple. It's not going to be good. And then he gets to our passage, and he says, verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Note, he does not say 2,000 years after the tribulation of those days. He says immediately, right after that happens. After the distress, the deception, the abomination, etc., immediately after that, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, or also translated, all the tribes of the land of Israel will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels, also translated messengers, with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, when you go home to lunch, do you talk to your family in this way? I hope not. My children do sometimes, but that's a different story. Is this the way that people normally talk? No. Is this the way that Jesus normally talks? No. What's going on here? This language is cryptic. It's full of these big cosmic images, and then it's loaded with these Old Testament references. This is poetry. It's not prose. And prose always aims to say one thing, right? And say it clearly and simply. Poetry has a more expansive kind of way of tackling things. So we shouldn't be surprised that when we find Jesus talking about this one thing, at the same time he's hinting at something much deeper. That's how the language works. So, for instance, next week, December 4th, is, get ready, Bacon Sunday. Woo! All right? Well, that was kind of underwhelming, I'm going to be honest. So, that's okay. We'll keep going. If I wanted to encourage Alex and say Alex, I think Bacon Sunday is going to be a success, I would say something like this. I'd say, Alex, I think Bacon Sunday is going to be a success. You can see how much enthusiasm that the congregation has about this event. It's clearly going to be magnificent. Something simple like that. But if I wanted to convey to Alex, let's say, that not only is Bacon Sunday going to be a success, which I'm now doubting, but really this is a kind of going to be a marker pointing toward the culmination of all of Alex's life and ministry, maybe I would say something like this. Alex, this is going to be the Wolpian crescendo of your career. This is going to be like Hamilton passing Verstappen and Verstappen's wheels coming off in the final corner. It's going to be like a lifetime of otter ale condensed into a single bacon sandwich. It will be Bridget going on to the podcast. She's not here, so I can say that. I think people are even going to leave their deviled eggs at home. Now, let's just write that down and then put it in a can and open it again 2,000 years later. In the immediate sense, what am I talking about? Bacon Sunday. Did I say anything directly about Bacon Sunday there? Like one thing. I said a bacon sandwich, and that's it. There's all this terminology taken from other pieces of Alex's life. Everybody was a little uncomfortable because they're like, I got some of those jokes, but I didn't get all of them. What's going on here? And then it hints at something more than just a successful Sunday morning filled with breakfast sandwiches cooked by the men of the vestry. You should all be there after the 9 a.m. service. So you could take everything I said literally and show up next Sunday expecting a beer and a Formula One race, which would be awesome, but sadly that's not happening. These will not be alcoholic bacon sandwiches. There will not be alcohol at Bacon Sunday. At least I don't think so. I hope not. Or you could take my words really seriously and do the hard work of trying to understand the complex reality that is being communicated underneath and through all of these images. So it is with our passage this morning, except on a more profound level than the ridiculous example that I just gave you. We have three unique, complex images. And I want to draw a note here. This is where I lose people in the sermon, okay? So stick with me. This is not going to last long. We're going to do some heavy lifting for about 3 minutes, and then we're going to be done, okay? Can you do that? All right, here we go. So first image, Jesus says in verse 29, check out your Bibles. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Cosmic imagery. We need to know he's quoting Isaiah 13. And in that passage, the prophet is talking not about a cosmic shakeup, but about the fall of Babylon. And he says that the upheaval surrounding this political event will be so great that it'll be like the stars and planets are being thrown out of whack and darkness is covering everything. This is poetic language. So we need to read this and think, this is world-changing upheaval going on here. That's what Jesus is describing. Second image. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, or all the tribes of the land will mourn. Better translation. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Also, a quote from the Old Testament. Stick with me. Quote Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. Okay? This is a famous passage in which Daniel sees this Son of Man figure coming, riding on the clouds, coming to rescue everyone, right? That's how I always pictured it. It's like Gandalf running in on his horse at the end of the Battle of Minas Tirith. That was purely for you, Tammy Fire. Like the rescuer coming in on the white horse. Only problem, that's not what's happening in this passage. The Son of Man is riding in on the clouds, not toward earth, but toward the throne of the Ancient of Days, where he is glorified and given great validation. This is about the coronation of a king. So it's not necessarily a passage that Jesus isn't necessarily saying, hey, then I'm going to come back. He's saying, at that moment, I'm going to be exalted. Third image, verse 31. And he, the Son of Man, will send out his messengers with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So we have a sign in the previous verse and a trumpet. Is that peace imagery or war imagery? That's war imagery. And then we have messengers going out to gather a chosen people. Okay, that heavy lifting session is done. How are we feeling? You all with me? All right. Jesus says in verse 34, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place." So here's our question. Was there an event or a set of events within a generation of Jesus' lifetime that fulfills all of these criteria, that meets the upheaval and the validation of the Son of Man and the scattering? There was. I heard someone say the crucifixion and resurrection. That's part of it. Really good. See, we have really good. You guys are awesome. Sorry, you're on camera for that. Nothing I can do about it. But also, AD 70, 40 years after Jesus spoke these words, Roman forces under the general Titus broke through the walls of Jerusalem after a 5-month siege. There was cannibalism being practiced in the city. It was not good. And the Jewish historian Josephus claims that 1 million people were killed. And the temple, it was burned to the ground. Some reports say that the gold in the temple melted down in the fire and got in the crevices between the rocks, and the greedy soldiers came and pried the rocks apart so that they could get to the gold. Jesus knew what he was talking about. So, in the words of commentator Richard France, when the significance of the Old Testament imagery is appreciated, this passage may be recognized as a highly symbolic description of the theological significance of the coming destruction of the temple. That's what's going on here. And I wanted to show you that because I think we all need to see that Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem. He was many things more than just a prophet, but at very least, he was also a prophet. He predicted this, and he was right. And so when he says this other stuff, the second part we're about to get to, guess what? We can trust that he's right there as well. But as Alex has said, biblical prophecy is almost never just about one thing. If this passage is only about the destruction of the temple, why is Jesus being so cagey and weird about it? Why doesn't he just say, "Hey guys, don't you see it coming? The Romans are totally going to wreck this place. It's going to be bad." He could have just been plain about it, right? But he's not. He uses this Old Testament language that sounds like cosmic disintegration. So he's talking about the destruction of the temple, but he's not just talking about the destruction of the temple. There's another day in view. And this is where the passage hits me right between the eyes. He's going to answer the second question. Do you guys remember the second question? What will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age? How can we sort of know when this is about to happen, Jesus, so that we can kind of have the edge on everybody else and get ready? There's a whole industry actually, and it's on the rise, especially in 2022. There have been articles about this. There's an industry dedicated to publishing books that try to, quote-unquote, decode the words of the Old and New Testaments and then piece them together with the news cycle so that we can know when to get ready because the signs are suggesting that Christ is going to come. It sounds like heightened apocalyptic expectation, right? We need to know when we can get ready, but actually it pays less serious attention to the apocalypse. Because what Jesus says is, you don't need to know when to get ready. I'll tell you when to get ready. Get ready now. You say, when's the sign this is going to happen? Jesus says, I don't know. No one knows. But you need to be ready now. Verse 36. Concerning that day and hour, no one knows. Not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, remember the flood, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. His point here is he's not talking about any specific thing other than that there's no category, special category, racial, ethnic, church people versus not church people that will separate you and make you secure. The only security is hiding in him. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. I hesitate to use this example and wrestled over it with Alex a lot because the sermon is not about me. I just want to make that very clear. But I love you, church, and I think we need to sit in this a little bit. 6:30 p.m. on Sunday night, July the 31st. I had a rough day. I did a youth retreat. I was exhausted. Called my dad. He was in the middle of something, and he dropped what he was doing, listened to me for 10 minutes as I just word vomited. And then I got home, and he listened, and he preached the gospel to me in the middle of this conversation. And then he said, "I love you, son," and he hung up the phone because I had to go. Next morning, he had a 9:30 a.m. appointment, conference call. And he got up early to prepare, as any of you who are lawyers know you often have to do, and also to spend some time praying. 9 o'clock a.m., my mother is getting ready to go out for her morning walk, kisses my dad on the lips, and says, "I love you, I'll be back." He says, "I love you," shuffling his notes around, preparing for his 9:30 a.m. appointment. 9:26 a.m. comes. My dad feels lightheaded, and boom, is standing in the presence of the judge of the living and the dead, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is to come. Are you ready for that moment? Does anyone know when that's going to happen for you? Do you know? We go about our lives thinking that all these things matter. Things that don't matter. What am I going to get for Christmas? How am I going to maneuver my way through this situation at work? How am I going to get what I want? How can I sort of push back whatever thing is lurking in the corner of my life that's really going on in my soul? How do I keep that at bay so that I don't have to do business with the real issues in my life? What are you going to say? I'm not speculating that this moment might happen to you. If you are a breathing human in this room, this moment will happen to you. And it will come at an hour that you do not expect it. It could happen tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Do you really want to take a chance and say, "Oh, it'll be 20 years later"? I'll resolve my theological doubts and quandaries, or better yet, I'll hide behind a few of these so that I don't have to do business with God. Are you ready? Because no one knows. It could happen right now. If there's one passion in my life, it's let's get people ready for this, because this is reality. This is what's actually coming at us. What did my dad say in that moment? I know, actually. I can totally see it, because this was like his resounding message. Nothing in my hand I bring, only to thy cross I cling. Naked to flee to thee for rest. That's what he said. And that's how you become ready. So what if you have an appointment tomorrow morning with the judge at 9:30 a.m.? What if you do? I'm not saying you do, but you might. Here's a few concrete suggestions that I want to invite us into as a church community. We have nothing going on for the rest of this church service except worshiping God. What if we spend the rest of this church service, instead of just going through the motions, doing business with God? Confess Christ, in the words of the Nicene Creed. Maybe for the first time, if that's where you're at. Confess your sins with your whole heart. Read through it slowly. Receive the bread and the wine. A Savior gives himself for you. And then worship your heart out. And then go home, call your kids, tell them you love them. Call your parents, tell them you love them. Call your enemies, tell them you're sorry and you forgive them. Confess your secret sins to your spouse. Because you don't know. You just don't. And don't waste another moment. There's this beautiful moment in the end of C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. It's this fictional work where he sort of depicts all of these these ghosts coming out of hell and coming into the presence of heaven. I know there's some theologically, not my point, man on every point, but there's this moment where this man who's all of his lusts and idols and things that he's been holding back from God are embodied in this lizard sitting on his shoulder. And the angel comes up and wants to invite him up into the mountains where glory goes further up and further in. But first the lizard has to die. And so the angel comes to him and says, "May I kill it?" "Well, there's time to discuss that later," says the man. "There is no time. May I kill it?" "Please, I never meant to be such a nuisance. Please, really, I don't want to bother. Look, it's gone to sleep of its own accord, see? I'm sure it'll be all right now. Thank you ever so much. May I kill it?" Honestly, I don't think that there's the slightest necessity for that. I'm sure I should be able to keep it in order. I really think the gradual process would be far better than killing it. The gradual process is of no use at all. "Don't you think so?" "Well, I'll think over what you said very carefully. I honestly will. In fact, I'd let you kill it now, but as a matter of fact, I'm not feeling frightfully well today. It would be most silly to do it now. I need to be in good health for the operation, so some other day, perhaps." And the angel replies, "There is no other day. All days are present now." Amen.